What's up? What's up? How is everybody doing? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How you feeling, brother?
I'm doing well. How are you, Mr. Smith?
Good, good. I cannot complain. Cannot complain. A little bit of a busy morning here. I was just recording with Aaron Matei and Katie Halper over on their podcast, which was great. I really love those guys. So it was fun. It was cool.
Who that is. Who is that?
Aaron Matei, he's a journalist. He wrote for The Nation for a while, and then hold on, am I getting confused on this? I shouldn't say it wrong, but I think he's over at he's at the Gray Zone now with that's Max Blumenthal and Aaron Matei out there. He's great. He was one of the absolute best journalists on Russiagate. Just phenomenal. Like, he's a left-wing guy, but he was just totally all over that. Like, look, this is just the most ridiculous thing ever that the CIA is saying Trump's a Russian spy, and did like great work on just tearing it apart, like going through each one of their claims and what the evidence was. So he was very helpful for me during that. He also did great reporting on Syria back in I want to say 2016, 2017, 2018, in those years. Just great. So anyway, it was just a lot of fun to talk with those guys. It was, I think, a very interesting conversation. So go look for that on their podcast. I am not sure what the name of it is, but I'll tweet it. Whenever it's out, I'll tweet it.
Yesterday, I brought my skis into the shop. I'm hoping that my legs hold up, and going to be skiing out in Boozman.
Well, if not, then you know how the Robbie the Fire Bernstein story ends. It ends with a tragic skiing incident where his knees were separated from his body. And
I sure hope not. But there is a possibility of hitting one mogul, re-tearing whatever I tore over the summer, and then having to take the ski patrol down and sitting on a stool on stage and being like, I'm an idiot.
Oh, dude. I mean,
that is possible, but I'm going for it.
Even as you say it, I'm like, would be really funny though. Like, I mean, you don't even got to worry about jokes for like the first 5 minutes of your set. Like, you'll find enough. There's a well right there that you'll be able to dig into. But yes, anyway, we will be out in Bozeman, Montana, just coming up now in a little over a week. So go grab some tickets. Still a few seats available. ComicDaveSmith.com. And then, of course, the following week we will be out in, what do we got? We got Louisville, Kentucky, one night only, January 30th, and then January 30th and 31st we'll be in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And then I'm sorry, wait a minute. My mistake. January 30th, we're in Louisville. January 31st and February 1st, we're in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The following week after that, Key West, Florida. Then Buffalo, Boston, Chicago, Rosemont, Appleton, Wisconsin, Denver, Cleveland, Tacoma, Spokane, Tampa, and still a few more dates on there that have not been added yet. So we are going to be busy this year.
I'm just smiling because it's like you just scheduled drinking for me. Like those are a dangerous 3 weekends in a row. I've been looking forward to traveling to Louisville, Key West. It's remarkable how much drinking goes on down there. And then Buffalo, I've never seen anything in my life. That one time I went into a bar in Buffalo and it was freezing, and I ordered a Maker's Mark on the rocks and got a milkshake glass. And I'm like, I guess I'm having one. I don't even understand the economics on this, on how that was only $8, but sure, I'll drink a bottle out of this glass.
They are, yeah, I have scheduled some drink. I should also put on my website, like, when Rob needs to go get blood work done, when he needs to take liver enzyme medication. We'll schedule it all out. Don't you guys worry. But I am looking forward to a lot of these shows. Anyway, ComicDaveSmith.com for all those ticket links. All right. So to start today's show, I can't not. That's my only disclaimer. I get, at this point now, in this weird world that we live in this weird career that I've carved out for myself, I get flooded on social media whenever Chris Cuomo says something dumb. It's my cross to bear. I don't know, but they are always, and everybody's just, like, oh, Dave, you got to knock this one out of the park again. And so I don't know, particularly in this clip where I do feel, maybe this is just my own narcissism, but I do feel like I'm a little bit a part of these rants. Like, it's always kind of directed at me. I mean, the last time he actually called me out by name. This time he doesn't mention me. But as I've made clear,
it felt like it was about you. I don't think that was narcissism. It feels like he's talking about you.
I mean, the real issue is that Cuomo just can't get over it. He just can't get over the fact that in his mind, and I get it, you know, like he's a Cuomo. He was the mayor's kid, and then, or I'm sorry, the governor's kid, and then his brother became governor too, and he's the #1 show on CNN. And then he comes into this debate with some podcaster comedian and just gets walloped. And that's, I understand that can be tough, but that's not really my fault. And as I've said before, I reserve the right to just destroy you anytime I want to. So that's where we are. And then Chief Nerd is like one of my favorite accounts on Twitter. And then he always posts these videos. And so I always see him because I'm always interacting. He's like in my algorithm or whatever. And then even if he wasn't, I mean, Jesus, man, the amount of people who just sent this to me was pretty nuts. Anyway, no further ado, let's go to our guy Chris Cuomo and his latest.
So no, I'm not going to be able to cover the world the way CNN can. But whatever I'm covering, my reporting, what I know, my sources, I'm okay. A lot more than these guys on digital media. I mean, are you kidding me? They're not reporters. They don't have sources. That's why they go with some sources and they take it from other places. And then they package it in an opinion, which is fine. But the idea that they are at an advantage against the Wall Street Journal because they cherry pick every time somebody gets something wrong, like, you know how easy that is to do? How often do they get things wrong? How often are they half-truths? They want you to believe that the vaccine that Donald Trump got us faster than we could have ever gotten it otherwise, he says, and everybody seems to agree, the man they voted for and supported for president wound up producing something that's poison.
All right, so just pause it.
COVID vaccine.
Just how sad is all of this? I mean, what can I even say here, Rob? It's just, I mean, just pathetic. It's the same old thing, the same Sam Harris thing where you're just counting on like the esteem of the Wall Street Journal. And how you know, and like, look, again, sure, fine. The Wall Street Journal has a budget and they have journalists and they have sources and they have, you know, but what does all that result in? It ends up resulting in just being what? The CIA's mouthpiece or something like that? So, okay, yes, there's these people online who just have opinions, who just point out when someone's getting something wrong, and that's easy to do. All right, fine. It does come fairly easily to me. I agree. It's what an advantage. All I have to do is point out what you guys are wrong about, which, by the way, was everything. Everything. And then, you know, again, I understand he's not like saying me by name, but I don't know exactly who the fuck he's talking about here. And it's like, and then he goes, oh, well, you know, I actually, for a second there, kind of like got my eyebrows up. Like when he goes, when the first time I heard this, not just now, but when I heard this, where he goes like, well, anyone could do that. I mean, I could point out what you're wrong about. And I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, that's right. That's how these things work. I can point out what you're wrong about and you can point out what I'm wrong about. So what do you got on me? What? That the vaccine is poison, that Trump, the guy you voted for, is the one who did that. But I mean, like, if he's not talking about me, who's he talking about? Like any of the Rogan? Hey, first off, none of us supported Donald Trump the first time. So that doesn't really work, right? And it's like, yeah, none of us said the vaccine was poison exactly. That's not what we said. Why don't, it's like, if you want to point out the things that were, if it's so easy to point out the things we're wrong about, then why do you have to lie? Why can't you just take on something we actually said? I don't know. It's become a theme in my career, which is that like everybody who's so outraged about me always has to totally straw man what it is I'm saying. Again, I understand this one isn't specifically about me, but if it's so easy to do, so then tell me, what did I get wrong? Like, but make it something I actually said. And like, yeah, Donald Trump, what even is the claim here? Donald Trump got the vaccine faster than it could have been done without Operation Warp Speed. Okay. I guess I'll concede that. Sure, it probably happened faster because of that. The claim isn't that the vaccine is poison. Okay. Now, it might be for some people. Like, is it true that people get vaccine injured by this vaccine? Yes, undeniably. Nobody denies that anymore. Not even Chris Cuomo. Okay. Now, Chris Cuomo certainly would have denied that when we were saying it was true and he was saying it's not. Like when he was at CNN, he certainly would have denied that. But no, the claim, and look, let's just make them real simple here. The claim is that, number one, the vaccines did not work at all as they were sold, that they were sold on lies. Two, it's not that they got it wrong, it's that they lied about it. Okay. So, like, in other words, when Fauci was out there, and by the way, the new director of the National Institute of Health, assuming he gets through, Jay Bhattacharya, was one of the best guys on pointing this out. It's not like when Fauci was saying, if you take this vaccine, you can't get COVID and you can't transmit it. He was totally like just being inexcusably reckless when he said that. I don't know if Jay Bhattacharya would actually call Fauci a liar. Like, I'll call him that. I don't know if he'd use that word. He would say something more professional sounding, like a real Princeford smart genius guy that I'm not. But he would have said something like, you know, the data does not back up this claim at all. Okay. But like, I'll take that and say, yeah, he's lying. There was no scientific evidence that this was true. And yet he told people that. This was repeated by people like Chris Cuomo and Rachel Maddow. And this guy, have you heard of Joe Biden? He was the president of the United States. He also said the same thing. It was repeated by everyone that if you get the vaccine is safe and effective, and if you get it, you can't get COVID and you can't transmit COVID. That's what was told to anyone. And then a bunch of people took it who never should have. Okay. And that's claim number 3, that a huge portion of the people who took the vaccine never should have, that they were taking a risk for absolutely no reward. And that the truth is that people who were not immunocompromised, who were not old and sick, particularly, here's the one group that I just never get, there's no scientific response from this: young, healthy people who had already had COVID were in many cases forced to get the vaccine and then forced to get boosters on top of it. That is totally based on pseudoscience. There is absolutely no justification for that. Now, if it's so easy to point out what's wrong, Chris Cuomo, here's the challenge, all right? I know you're never going to debate me again, but here's the challenge. Point out what's wrong in any of that. Tell me what I'm getting wrong. Take on something I'm actually saying and tell me what's wrong about that, because it's so easy to just sit back and point out what other people get wrong. Okay, let's hear it. Any thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I don't remember all the ins and outs of COVID anymore. I certainly had it all in my brain at the time. I remember my grandfather used to read a lot about the Civil War. At some point, he stopped reading about it, and he's like, I don't remember any of that. Like, I used to be able to tell you every detail of like the wars and this and that. But if I had to give a shorter just theme to what we were talking about, is, hey, they're lying to you and they shouldn't be taking away our freedoms. And so I think he's kind of misrepresenting it as with the poison claim. I think I said that there might be risks and that there's really no upside here. So I don't know why you would take it, but I don't think we ever went too, personally, I don't think we went too extreme on, I made jokes that your dick was going to fall off. I think the freedom
and that turned out to be right.
Yeah, well, I wanted to have it removed anyway, so for me personally, it was convenient. But anyways, I think we were always a little bit more concerned with the freedom part. And 3 years later, it's very easy to try and relitigate these things and then now get a detail wrong, and it doesn't matter because we were 100% right at the time when it was actually important. Just one more thing, and this is technical. I agree with everything you said there, but I do read the Wall Street Journal on a nearly daily basis. I've been reading it for over a decade. I think there's a lot of terrible media out there. And in the opinion sections, I certainly think that they overpitch wars, and maybe through the COVID era, they were guilty of omission and that other people did much better coverage about how the regime was getting things wrong. I don't know that I would slap the CIA title on the Wall Street Journal the same I would CNN.
Or maybe the Washington Post deserves it more than the Wall Street Journal. I'll say this: the Wall Street Journal is the most interesting of the newspapers to read. because the Wall Street Journal is what they're saying to people who make $400K a year. It's not exactly the same. They're not talking to just like their lowest level of tax cattle. Like they're talking to kind of like the upper middle class tax cattle. And so you just get more of, you just get more. And by the way, I'm also not trying to act like there's good stuff, but there's been good reporting in the New York Times and in the Washington Post too. They often try to pretend like they never reported that when the narrative changes later. But I do agree with you. There is some value in the Wall Street Journal. So I'm not sorry. I'm not trying to offend your sensibilities. I see where your loyalty is, Rob. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Proton VPN. Proton created Proton VPN to further protect the journalists, activists, and everyday citizens who use Proton Mail. Proton VPN breaks down the barriers of internet censorship, allowing you to access restricted online content. Proton's secure VPN sends your internet traffic through an encrypted VPN tunnel to keep your browsing data safe, even over public or untrusted internet connections. And as a Swiss VPN provider, Proton does not log user activity or share data with third parties. Their anonymous VPN service keeps your browsing history private and enables an internet without surveillance. Proton VPN is available on all of your devices. This includes PCs, Macs, smartphones, even routers. A secure internet connection you can trust is essential to maintaining your privacy on your laptop at home, your mobile device on the road, or your workstation at the office. And to check out an exclusive and limited time offer, go to protonvpn.com/Dave Smith. However, like I said, this is a limited time offer, so go check it out today. protonvpn.com/Dave Smith. All right, let's get back into the show. But anyway, I just think that this, again, as always, with this whole, it's very similar to the Sam Harris critique. I get saying, oh, come on, the internet just has these random guys, but this isn't a replacement for the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, Henry Kissinger, or whatever. Again, if you're going to make that argument, fine. I think it's a valid argument, but you also have to deal with the fact that all of these institutions have completely failed. And even to your point on the Wall Street Journal, it's like, yeah, but like when it really mattered the most, it's not like like you said, a lot of the really important shit's going to be omitted from those pages.
By the way, to state it differently, I agree with him. It'd be nice. It would be much nicer to live in a world where the people that have all the resources to do journalism and get these stories right, got it right. I would prefer to live in that world. By the way, I like writing jokes. It's a lot easier to just read the actual information and then write jokes about it than to have to sit through it and go, hey, I don't think you're giving me the real information. And to go one step further, if we lived in an honest world, in an honest environment, people like us that have been on, I wouldn't call it the sidelines, because we're on the forefront of kind of the internet news, media, political commentary game. But like in a different environment, I think people that like to make money might step in and go, wow, these guys are actually really good at this. Why aren't we giving them a producer and, what does Sean Hannity make a year? $30 million or whatever?
I'll take it.
That's what I'm, how many producers?
I'll do it for half.
Yeah.
I'll do it for half that.
So I'm just saying, to further combat what he's saying, I wish that the news organizations that had all the resources didn't use all the resources to lie to us and sell government agendas, because that's typically 100%. What I'm watching them doing. And on the same note, if you gave us all those resources, yeah, you know how much better at this we could be? I would love to be a full-time drunk and just get talking points from someone that does my job and just puts it together.
Well, this is what's so interesting about this. And this is part of the reason why I've talked about this several times on the show. I mean, number one, it's interesting to me, and it's a little bit surreal. It's weird to debate the guy who was the #1 show at CNN. It's weird to be called out by Sam Harris by name, and then, okay, so there's a little like my own like ego in this. I'll fully admit that. But it's like when they make this point, you're like, listen, dude, no one agrees with you more than me. Do you know how disconcerting it is? Like, if the fucking shithead comedian from the Legion of Skanks who has a fucking portion of my garage turned into a podcast studio, if I was going to debate the #1 show host at CNN, I should find myself against somebody formidable. And I should be like, whoa, this guy knows way more than I know about this stuff. This guy's read every book I've read, and then he's read 5 books, slapping down the stuff of the books that I've read. And this guy is just like a wealth of knowledge and information and wisdom, and I just can't even compete with it. But that's not what I find when I go to debate the #1 show host on CNN, right? So, like, I'm sorry, you can't turn around and blame me for that. The point is that the institutions have failed. They got it all wrong. And no, I'm sorry, Chris Cuomo. It would not, like, if you want to try to do, again, I mean, I don't know, like when we debated, he had prepared to some degree. He mentioned Legion of Skanks and he mentioned a few things about me. So, like, he had watched a few hours of, or I don't know how much, but he had watched some of my content. But, like, if Chris Cuomo wants to sit down and watch the last 3 years or 4 years of Part of the Problem, for him to sit there and say, like, oh, it would be just as easy for me to sit back and point out everything you've gotten wrong, I don't think so. Like, I will gladly, as I said to his face in the debate, I will gladly put my track record up against yours, and we can see who got what wrong and who got what right, and how important the things we got wrong were. And if we got something wrong, how quickly we adjust it. You know what I mean? And, like, it took in the new information. I'm happy to do that. All right, let's keep playing.
The COVID vaccine kills. The COVID vaccine kills more people than it helped in any way. That's what they want you to believe. And you should have never been forced.
Pause it right there. Pause it right there.
By the way,
again, just bring it back a few seconds because he's going to get into this forced to take it. But again, it's just. And this would be my only and this is why it's so easy to debate a guy like Chris Cuomo, because, like, if we were in a debate and he says something like that, the follow-up question is just okay, who said that? Go ahead, Cuomo. Who said that? Who said that the whole thing is that the vaccine has killed more people than it helped? By the way, that's, like, first of all, I don't know how you would even measure that. I don't know how we would even know. Like that. How do you measure the people that the vaccine helped? I mean, it's like the standard during the height of the craziness, Rob, was just assuming that it would have been worse if you hadn't gotten the vaccine, right? So, like, if you get the vaccine, you remember this during COVID, like, if you get the vaccine and then you get COVID and you get very, very sick, well, that's proof you would have died if you didn't have the vaccine or something like that. So I don't think anybody's necessarily claiming that it hurt more people than it helped or killed more people than it helped. As I've said, I do think that there was an argument that people who were very vulnerable at the very beginning, when there were still very deadly strands of COVID out there, might have been better off taking this vaccine. Like, I don't really know. I'm not, like, claiming to have not. What I'm saying is that there were people who didn't fall into the risk category at all. Like, I use the example a bunch of times, but it's just because I happen to know the kid. There was literally a guy, he was 25 or something like that. And he was at an Ivy League grad school. And he literally, they made him get the 2 doses of the vaccine, like, get the vaccine at first. And then, like, whatever it was, months later, he got COVID. And then the next month, the school decided that the policy was to get a booster. So they made him, a month after having COVID, get a booster for COVID, when he's a young, healthy guy, had already had COVID, had already had 2 shots. I'm saying that makes no sense. And there's lots of people who were forced into this category to get it. And some number of those people did get vaccine injured. And 100% of the people who got vaccine injured didn't need to be. They were just in a group where COVID was never a threat to them. It was statistically non-existent, the threat of COVID. So, like, that's the point. And nobody seems to want to take on that. And at the time that this was happening, basically everyone was like, you're a bad person if you even bring that up. if you even bring up that this vaccine is being pushed on people who should not take it. All right, let's keep playing.
I also, it's just,
sorry, go ahead, Rob.
It's the wrong place to litigate this, which is around government. There were unintended consequences of government shutting down the country and going full COVID nonsense. And that's what we were against. We were against government removing freedoms, telling you that you couldn't pursue your job, telling you that you couldn't go exercise. You look at missed education, you look at missed cancer diagnosis, like you look at the fact that people stop living life for a year or 2 years, or people are still trying to put their careers together, or they lost their restaurants, they lost their businesses, they built their whole lives over. There are secondary conversations to be had about the dangers of the actual vaccine, of which the data well, I think, has been too muddy to really prove.
Yeah.
As to, I think, and I think the government purposely manipulated the data with things such as not considering you vaccinated until 2 weeks after you got it, and all sorts of other, and anyone with an unknown vaccine status is considered to be unvaccinated. They pulled all sorts of shenanigans throughout the entire thing. You're never going to have a good data set, but that was never the core part of the conversation that we were having, which was, hey, they're lying to you, and we shouldn't be shutting down the country over this. And what data do you have to suggest that we should? And why are they removing your medical freedoms over this vaccine that hasn't been properly studied? So I think he's just having kind of a different conversation. And you could have that argument, but like you're already jumping nine levels past kind of the terrible decisions that government made that we talked out against and Cuomo sold on his TV show.
Yep. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Fume. Fume has been with us for a long time, and I really love Fume. Fume is a flavored air device that helps you give up your bad habits. I know there's a lot of people who have a lot of bad habits out there, and a lot of us are trying to quit, myself included. Fume is great for this. It draws flavor to your mouth. It gives you something to fidget with. It gives you something to pull on. And this is very helpful when breaking bad habits, as we all know. It's a totally healthy alternative. There's no vapor, no nicotine, no toxic flavors, no batteries. It looks awesome. It's got a nice weighted feel. And like I said, it's made to fidget with. It's very good for calming anxiety when you're trying to give up bad habits. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story. For a limited time, if you use the promo code PROBLEM, you'll get a free gift with your journey pack. Just go over to tryfume.com, tryfum.com, and use the promo code PROBLEM, or you can scan the QR code on the screen and get a free gift when you order the journey pack today. All right, let's get back into the show. Perfectly said, 100%. All right, let's play the rest.
I believe. And you should have never been forced to take it. Now, by the way, I don't believe you were forced to take it. There was freedom of choice. There wasn't freedom from consequence for those choices. You got the government, Donald Trump, saying this is what we need to do it. And then you think you're going to get the same access everywhere if you don't do those things. And you don't think that the numbers show that when the vaccine came out and made it into the vulnerable communities, we didn't see a precipitous drop in the cases and in serious illness? I mean, it's not even a close call.
Okay.
So no, I'm not going to be.
Those are the bombshells right there of stupidity.
Yes, this is right. So these are the bombshells of stupidity. So like, let's really take this apart a little bit. First of all, this just tired, brain dead argument that like, oh, you weren't forced. Freedom of choice doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Okay, so I guess if I put a gun to your head and say, give me your wallet or I'll blow your brains out, that's not me forcing you to give me the money, right? No, you have a choice. See, you have a choice. You can give me your wallet or you can have your brains blown out. Oh, that doesn't mean freedom from consequences, Rob.
Right, the consequences are from you. That's mob shit. Hey, yes, do this or I'm going to do the following to you. So that's not a choice. That's you are going to do those consequences. That's not like, I can't even think of the example.
It's not even mob shit. It's mob shit from the very dim brother of the Don, or I should say the son of the previous Godfather. It's Fredo mob shit, okay? This is like, who are you expecting to actually believe you? You're saying like, when he's saying, oh, you're not going to be able to go everywhere, he's talking about the vaccine passports. And these were not decisions, by the way. It's like, if you want to make some libertarian argument as if, Chris Cuomo is going to pretend to be a libertarian all of a sudden, but if you want to say that, like, okay, like if your employer would fire you, because there were like tons of, say, like privately enforced vaccine mandates. So if you want to claim that like your company deciding you had to take the vaccine isn't force, okay, there's an argument there. You're still wrong. We could get into that if you want to. Like, that still is really force in the context of how much government intervention there was in this process to begin with. But you're talking about like the government of major cities across the country decided for a while we were straight up second-class citizens in New York City. You couldn't go to an event at Madison Square Garden. You couldn't sit down at a restaurant. You couldn't go to like movie theaters. There were all types of things you weren't allowed to go to. And that's the government coming in and telling those businesses. Look, I remember, I've told you this story before. I'm not going to tell it again now, but the story when me and my wife got turned away from that restaurant because I wasn't going to show the fake vaccine card. I told you the guy who I was almost like getting in a fight with, is a Mexican guy at the spot. He literally, what snapped me out of it was he was like, it's $1,000 fine for everyone I bring it. Like, he was literally going, dude, of course I want your business, but I can't risk the fine that'll come with it. Like, this was a little diner in Washington Heights. You know what I mean? We were going to maybe spend $60 there. And you can't risk $1,000 fine for like a $60, potential revenue. That's force, dude. That's force. They're forced. You were fining the businesses if they served vaccinated people. The businesses were being forced to tell people they weren't allowed to come in if they weren't vaccinated or didn't have the dumb card, which everyone could get a fake one anyway. It was all stupid. It was just a matter of like whether you wanted to play that game or not, which I did not on principle, didn't want to play that game. But look, I mean, the argument that it wasn't forced because you had choice, but there were consequences. Yes, consequences imposed by the governments, which you are forced to live under. There's no opt-out process. If you're in New York City, you can't go, I don't really like the government of New York City, and I would like to live under a different government. You don't have that option. So yes, it's force. So I don't know. Anything else you want to jump in with, Rob? Please go ahead, and then I could get to the next part.
Let's get to the next part because it's also gloriously stupid. But
all right,
I was just so irritated by that freedom, the consequences from you. You're just describing force. That's the way force works. If I tell you, hey, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to come punch you in the face. That's force. That's coercion.
Well, right. I mean, and it's not, look, I suppose, as is always the case with laws and governments, I suppose you could argue that it's a few levels removed from like the naked, blatant force. But like, so when, when that, the store owner or the diner, the guy who works at the diner there is saying, hey, it's $1,000 fine. Okay. So if he gets that fine, you're going to be like, okay, let's say, well, it's not force. It's, it's just, these are the consequences of the choice that you made, right? So the choice you made was to let somebody who doesn't have proof of vaccination eat at your restaurant. And then the consequence is $1,000 fine. Because, okay, so let's say that guy who owns the diner says, no, I'm not paying that. What happens next, Cuomo? Huh? What happens if he says, I'm not paying you the $1,000? I mean, take me through this. I mean, okay, there'll probably be like a notice. There'll probably be a follow-up letter. Maybe the fine will be increased. Maybe, and then eventually they'll fucking come take it. They'll come take it by force. That's what's always there. With any law or any government policy, the threat of force is always right behind it. It's always like, yeah, okay, if you don't do that, like with any ticket, with any fine, it's like, yes, eventually they will come with naked force. And it's only because there is that threat that anybody has to listen to it at all, right? So anyway, that's all. Okay, and then, all right, so what was the other big one? Now I'm getting so hung up on this one, I forgot for a second. I'm sorry. What was it?
You gotta replay it. I also am,
yeah. Okay, here, just play the last few seconds of that clip. It'll come right back to us as soon as we play it. But there was one more real dumb thing. There was one more real Fredo moment at the end of that
didn't see a precipitous drop in the cases and in serious illness?
There you go.
I mean, it's not even a close call.
Not even a close call, Dave.
Not even a close call. I mean, you want to...
He must have great data set. Put him up against Tom Woods on that one.
I mean, let's look. If we could, Natalie, see if you could pull up, even just in the U.S., the COVID death rate, but like if we could get it by year. Is there a way to do like the COVID death rate from say 2020 through maybe 2023 or something like that? Because he's wrong. This is just like an objective question, and he's straight up wrong about that. And if you remember, Rob, they had to pivot to what the reason was for that, which was too much like vaccine hesitancy or something like that. But it is just not the case that as soon as you saw the vaccine rollouts, you saw this huge drop in COVID cases and COVID deaths. Right?
I don't remember, but even if you were to have had that, you wouldn't be able to prove that it wasn't post-spike in the area. So I think the better proof against this would be the Tom Woods thing of looking at the, which you've spoken to, but looking at the charts and like the vaccinated or not. What was that?
Well, Tom Woods, okay, so he had a whole thing, which, by the way, I really highly recommend Tom's book on this if you want to go through it. It's like the best book that was written about COVID, at least so far, called Diary of a Psychosis. And I if you just Google that and Tom Woods, you'll find the book real quick. I think it was like covidbook.com. But so he would look at these areas. You look at the areas and you do it not just about the vaccine, but just like about
lockdowns. Or not lockdown, right?
Well, it was lockdowns, non-lockdowns. It was mask mandates versus not mandates, mask compliance versus where they didn't have high mask compliance. And there's no trend. There is no trend. Like you cannot look, you could not pick them out on a map. In fact, he did the whole quiz thing where the joke of it was that no one can get it right because the virus simply acted the way it was going to act. None of these measures mitigated it. Now, we don't have real good, honest data out of China where they had like some real hardcore authoritarian lockdowns. And it is possible that the most authoritarian lockdowns, like the lockdowns where you let people starve to death in their house because you won't let them out to go to the supermarket, it is possible that that had a meaningful impact on COVID. But short of advocating that you want to do something like that, doing these sloppy, dumb lockdowns the way that we did it in the United States of America, where you just deem the majority of people non-essential, but you're still allowed to go to the grocery store and you're still allowed to go to the liquor store and you still whatever. It did nothing. There's no and of course there was the who was the Ivy League school that did the major study on this, where they found that same thing about lockdowns, that basically there was little, if any, difference between the areas that locked down and didn't, but there was enormous difference in the economic devastation, in the devastation toward children's learning improvements and things like that, and depression and suicide and stuff like that. So it was enormously costly with no discernible benefit at all. And the exact same thing is true about the areas that had vaccine mandates or vaccine passports or anything like that. There was absolutely no trend that enforcing this, and yes, it was forced, Cuomo. There's absolutely no evidence that enforcing any of this stuff actually did anything to mitigate the virus. To be clear, I'd still be against the stuff even if it did. I believe in liberty, and I don't think you can ruin people's lives, in this way. So even if there was, just to be clear, even if there was like a substantial, say, decrease in the death rate, or not the death rate, but in the total deaths, or a decrease in the transmission rate or something like that in lockdown areas, I'd still be against lockdowns because I don't think you have the right to rob people's lives from them. That being said, there just wasn't. There just is no benefit. And no, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure about this, that I'm right, that it's not true that there was a huge drop in COVID cases and deaths as soon as the vaccines came out. Let me see.
You know what? I guess I pivoted what he said in my head to just the overall strategy with the lockdowns. I don't remember the specifics on this. However, I do remember when kids started getting it and Fauci had to answer for that. And then, he started talking about the new variant, but don't worry, it's not as deadly.
Yeah, it was all. He's just not right about this. Okay, so let's see here because I just got this chart right here. So
we could always just do a follow up on this. I'll send it over to Steven, my Wonder Boy non-scientist autist on autist of the Run Your Mouth Enterprises, and he'll give us a quick answer. No problem.
Well, but look, even just looking at this, right? So let's take a look at this this chart that I just sent over, because I would say at the very least it is very unclear. So here, let's see here, Natalie, just if you could pull up, and this is a Pew Research, it says this is 2 years of coronavirus deaths in the United States. Can you pull that up, Natalie? Here, let's see. I just well, let me see. The one that I just sent you, did that come through? Yeah, okay. So here's, so if we could zoom in a little bit on that, if we could just make it a little bit bigger. I mean, so here you have, right? So you could look there, you have what you're going to have with COVID is let's keep the chart up. You're going to have these it typically had dips in the summer and spikes in the colder season, which is pretty consistent with upper respiratory viruses. Okay, so you have the initial wave here, as you can see in March when it comes in, going into the summer. That's a real bad wave. In the black is excess deaths, and in the blue is reported COVID-19 deaths. Okay, so then you have another massive wave in the winter of 2020. Okay, this is before, so right there in the middle, that middle kind of big jump that you see over December, this is before the vaccines are rolled out, right? The vaccines are rolled out in early 2021, okay? So then you have the summer of 2021, you have another dip. You could argue the dip's a little bit lower than the dip in the summer before. Doesn't seem to be any drastic relation, but as soon as it gets cold again, look at these peaks. The peak is as high as it was in March of 2020, and then actually here at the end, in December of 2021, it seems like the numbers are higher than they were originally in 2020. So, like, look, there's obviously, with all of these things, and this is what you were talking about with your COVID expert buddy, there's a lot of different ways to interpret data like this. And you know what I'm saying? Like, there's different arguments that can be made, but no, it is absolutely just not the case that there's this obvious drop once the vaccine comes out. Like, look, if you're talking about finding a cure for a disease, right? And a cure for a disease that was, I mean, I remember, you know, again, we'd have to go back and look at all the numbers of this, but pretty early on, like by the time, so if we go back, I'm sorry, if we pull that chart up again, by the time, if you're looking at the last jump there, the jump that's at the end of 2021, this is after already 70-something% of the adult population has been vaccinated. So if you're talking about you have a cure for a disease, and then you're going to argue like, look, this was obviously the cure, and look at the drop after the cure was introduced. Well, no, I'm sorry. Like, that's not the case. You could come up with some alternate explanation, perhaps, for why this was the case. This was all the fault of the unvaccinated or something like that. But you went from, in 2020, you had 100% of people not being vaccinated. And by the end of 2021, you had like 20% of people not being vaccinated at most. So no, if you're bragging that this was just so obvious, you would expect to see a drop, like a real, you know what I mean? Like, this thing is going down. That's not what you're seeing there at all. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Public Rec. If you're tired of squeezing into stiff dress pants, you got to check out the Game Changer pants from Public Rec. They are the office pants that look like Monday but feel like Sunday. Imagine clocking in while feeling as cozy as if you were still in bed sipping hot cocoa. With a soft hand feel and smooth drape, these pants are a fan favorite for a reason. Whether you're closing deals in the boardroom or mingling at company parties, the Game Changers will keep you looking sharp and feeling great. Public Rec is the ultimate men's clothing brand for blending comfort and style seamlessly. And trust me, you won't be disappointed. I can tell you personally, I am not a fan of dress pants, and I like to be comfortable. And if I was, luckily for me, I'm not in an office environment, but if I was, this is the type of thing I'd be looking for. Something that looks like dress pants, but feels real comfortable. So stop suffering in those regular pants and get comfortable. And for a limited time only, our listeners can get 20% off when you use the promo code problem at checkout at publicrec.com. So the website is publicrec.com. That's PUBLICREC.com, and use the promo code problem at checkout for 20% off your order. All right, let's get back into the show. Cuomo's just making a case. Now, if Cuomo actually wants, first off, he's not capable of actually getting into the data and like really looking through it. But like, no, it is not the case. What he's saying is absolutely not true. And it's just another, I know it's easy to sit here and point out things that people say that aren't true. It's easier for some of us than others, but no, it's just not the case at all that the vaccine came out and then they weren't. And this is why I was remembering, is because I'm remembering, like, you know, like I'm like you too, in the same way, where like all this stuff was in my brain and now we're going back a few years and I've been thinking about other stuff since then and I don't have it as fresh. But I do just remember, like, Israel was the example that we looked to a bunch, where they had because they were like way ahead of everybody else. They were like, they had like the highest vaccine rates, and then they were already like on boosters for their seniors before anyone else. And it was after that that they broke all their records for worst week in terms of transmission, worst week in terms of deaths, all these things that came after. So no, I'm sorry, but again, it's kind of like, I know this isn't like the deepest, like foolproof explanation of all of this stuff, but much like with a lot of these psychotropic drugs, much like SSRIs and shit like that, it's like, if you're telling me this is the cure for depression and you came out with the cure and depression has risen since then, I think it's reasonable for me to question whether that was really a cure or not. And likewise, if you come out with a cure for COVID and you force it on the public in large numbers, and then after a year of this, we're having a wave where it's as bad as the year before the vaccine was out, I think a reasonable starting point is to be skeptical of that cure. Because typically speaking, when you have a disease and then you come up with a cure for the disease, what you see is deaths from that disease going way down. So what Cuomo's doing here is he's trying to pretend that that's what happened in this example. Like, he's trying to pretend like we could all look at a chart, as if you could look at a chart and just see like, okay, COVID was all the way up here and then it just went down. Like after the vaccine came out, it just went down and down and down. If that were the case, there would be a much stronger argument here. It's just not. When you look at the data, that's not at all what happened. And you could have some different interpretations for like, why is it that, you know, this spike was worse than that spike or whatever. And there's lots of different, you know, obviously like natural immunity is a huge factor in all of this as well, but it's just not the case that exists when you actually look. The data doesn't bear that out. I don't know. All right. Any other thoughts, Rob, before we switch over to a next topic real quick?
It seems to me like you have the data stuff right there, but I just want to go back to, it doesn't matter. Government did not have the data it needed to, you know, pretend like there was an emergency and strip us all of our freedoms. And if anything, we learned the dangers of giving emergency powers to the government and their ability to abuse it. And I think the burden of evidence was on them. And I don't think the vaccines were overwhelmingly good or tested to a T. And I think the broader strategy of shutting down and removing people of their freedoms was a detriment to our society. And Fauci's probably a liar and hopefully will be prosecuted.
Couldn't agree more, my friend. Couldn't agree more. All right, let's just to end this on some on a light note, let's go check in with our friends over at Morning Joe. I saw this one this morning. Oh my God, this is glorious. Here is daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski, Mika Brzezinski, on Morning Joe.
And she still thinks he could have
Yeah, I'll
run
have
and
been
won.
right. So I'm just going to wait for that conversation. So
Well, no,
thank you, Susan, for that.
You give your theory that you think he could have won.
Look, everyone knows how I feel. I made it very clear after the debate that I thought he should continue. But that was not what most people wanted. So, but Joe Biden is the kind of person who pulls himself up from rock bottom. And I think he could have stumbled into it. I really do. People responded very badly when he beat Trump during that campaign to Trump bullying him or going after his remaining son.
Yeah, pause for it. Go ahead.
I know that she's going to say significantly dumber things, but I have to call out the stumbled into it, where the best hope that she has for him is that he could have Mr. Magoo'd his way in. That's her pitch. I mean, she's going to say much dumber things, but her pitch was not, hey, he could do the job. It was, he might have been able to stumble his way in. And
her pitch was, it was, you see a schizophrenic guy on the subway. I don't know. You see him again the next day. He's still alive. No one knows exactly how he did it, but everything tends to work out. It's Joe Biden. Hey, he's going to walk around. Yeah, he'll fall a couple times, but at the end of it, he'll probably stumble his way in. Literally, that's her argument. Literally, just seeing how much this guy has fallen apart since then. Since the debate when he was unable to speak words into a microphone, seeing how much more he's fallen apart since then, knowing that Donald Trump went on to win by such a wide margin, knowing that the internal polling that the Biden White House had was even worse than what ended up happening. They had Donald Trump getting 400 electoral votes. And she's still going to hang on to this view that he would have won. Here, let's play the rest. Let's hear her explanation for it.
Son, people stood up for Joe Biden because they knew who he was. They know who he is. And I think an aging Joe Biden is very self-aware about that. And so is his team around him. And he's still 10 times more qualified than what we've got. And he's qualified to manage the world stage. I think after that disastrous debate, he did a news conference. Remind me, Lemire, was it the NATO summit?
Yeah, a couple weeks later.
NATO
summit was
at
Washington.
8 at night. And yep, he got names wrong. Yep, he had to correct himself a few times. But his knowledge of world affairs was in depth and clear and generated exactly what was the reality that this guy could manage.
I'm sorry.
The many different.
Isn't that the opposite of clear? Isn't fumbling names literally the opposite of clear? And when you say, well, the American people know who he is. Yeah, an old guy with dementia that shouldn't be working the job. That's what we know. What is this other version of the person that was so laughably bad they had to oust him from office? Who's this other person that we know who he is? Because the version that we know appears to have dementia and lacks clarity.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't even know. I don't know why this is what's coming to my mind, but I remember in maybe like 2016, somewhere around that point. I remember when like radical feminism was really on the rise. It was like kind of like woke culture amongst like young kids was really like the cool thing. And I remember like arguing with like feminists about this. And there was back then rape culture was a big thing. They were talking about how we live in a rape culture. And I remember it was like I was arguing with this feminist chick who she worked at a comedy club. She was a nice chick, but we would argue and stuff. And it was summer in New York City. It was in the East Village. And it's the middle of summertime. And literally outside the window, like at Eastville Comedy Club, it used to be the front was like a big glass window. So you just look onto the street. And outside the window, it's the East Village. And it's young girls dressed in like, scantily clothed young girls. And like, I remember just being like, well, like you're saying there's a rape culture, but like look out on the street and girls are like walking around. Like, I'm just saying you don't find that in the Congo. You know what I mean? Like, what? It's just like a kind of thing where you're like, well, I don't even know what to say when you're claiming this. And she was literally claiming Congo stats. Like she was going 1 in 4 women are raped and all of this stuff. And I'm like, but like, wouldn't that fuck with you if like I was like, hey, in the Congo, where actually 1 in 4 women are raped, They don't tend to be walking around in short shorts with their booties hanging out, like kind of flirting with the guy. You know what I mean? Like you just don't kind of see. And again, I almost like, I remember being at a loss where I was always almost just like, I don't know how to take on your argument other than to just be like, but look, but like, are we both talking about the same world here? And again, I'm almost left with this feeling when you describe Joe Biden and your words to describe him are aware and clear. It's like, I mean, it's like compared to what? I mean, yeah, I guess we live in a rape culture in the sense that like there are people who are raped, you know, I mean, I guess Joe Biden is clear compared to a golden retriever, but compared to like other human beings who talk, what? Those are the adjectives that you would use to describe him? Clear, self-aware, a depth of knowledge. Joe Biden speaks in slogans and he can't even say the slogans. He stutters them, forgets what slogan he's in the middle of saying, and then says, well, no, you know the thing. And like, look, the fact that she even, like Rob, like you ever, the fact that she even has to say he could have stumbled his way in, the fact that she even has to bring up that the NATO summit was at 8 p.m., Rob. 8 p.m.? Like, only to a senile person is that the wee hours of the night. Who, like, what functioning, healthy person has, I'm sorry, 8 p.m. as an excuse? That it was at 8? Like, it'd be one thing if you were saying 3 in the morning, but you're saying it was after dinner? And you know how he gets sleepy. This is just so ridiculous. And like, I mean, I don't know, man. Again, look, I did not, she said everyone knows. I actually did not know that Mika was on the record saying he shouldn't drop out, that she was one of the few who actually dug in. But like the idea that after all of this, you're going to try to like rehabilitate the idea that Joe Biden wasn't too senile to run for president. It's like, of all, it kind of feels like the corporate media and the Democrats are almost like, they're just under fire from like the opposing military and there's nowhere to hide and everyone's attempting to like dive behind like bushes or something like that aren't really going to protect you from bullets whizzing everywhere. And you're almost, and it's like, I don't know, like Mika is choosing the shrub with the least amount of leaves or something where you're like, there's no, why would you go hide behind there? At least go hide behind the like, we went too woke or something, you know? You're hiding behind the like, no, Joe Biden really wasn't senile. Anytime you cannot, if I said pull up a clip of Joe Biden from this year, there's not one clip you can pull up where it's not just obvious. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Sheath Underwear. Sheath, I've been telling you guys about them forever. The best pair of boxer briefs you're ever going to get. Sheath uses moisture wicking technology to create underwear that keeps everything breathable and incredibly comfortable for you downstairs. I'm telling you, put on a pair of Sheath underwear. Get one pair. That's my challenge. Get one pair of Sheath underwear. You're going to put them on and be like, oh, these are the most quality, comfortable boxer briefs I've ever worn. I guarantee it. Sheathunderwear.com. Promo code problem20 for 20% off your order. Once again, sheathunderwear.com. Promo code problem20 for 20% off. All right, let's get back into the show.
I have a brilliant idea. You ready for this? Why don't we run the Mika Brzezinski experiment and just tell Joe Biden he's still president? I don't think he'll realize. And ask him any world issue that you want to ask him how we should deal with it. Just get a room, decorate it like it's, well, he doesn't even go to the Oval Office anymore. He just has the little teeny tiny desk outside of the Oval Office. So it wouldn't take much to Truman Show convincing Joe Biden that he's still the president and let him make... How much money does Joe Biden need? I think he's made it all running through Ukraine or whatever. I mean, like I said, I mean, the amount of people they're making on these payouts. You got this book deal for Kamala for $20 million. Who, let's keep that dumbass in front of the TV cameras and see what horseshit she says next. I say for both of them, let's get them television contracts. But the Joe Biden show will be like the Truman Show. And we'll get him that little teeny tiny desk that he makes his little announcements from. We'll get him a teleprompter. We can keep his team intact. And let's see how he presidents over the next 4 years.
I'd like literally if get Joe Biden in an interview and just ask him, because President Biden, display a depth of knowledge on any issue. Your choice.
You know me.
Your choice what issue it is. No, really, explain a depth of knowledge. By the way, this is what's so like maddening and also hilarious about Sam Harris or Chris Cuomo talking shit about me, you know?
Oh yeah,
It's
this
like,
is the lady with the team. This is the lady who got better data than us. Then she's standing by. No, Joe Biden can still do the job. That's the team of journalists behind her doing the research so that she can make more informed news than us.
Exactly. Those are the people with the team. And the person she's talking about is the president of the United States of America. And say whatever you want to about my views on the history of the conflict in Ukraine or in the history of Israel-Palestine or anything like that. Joe Biden can't show a depth of knowledge on any issue that could even compete with what I know about this shit. And that's objective. I'm not saying nobody could. There's lots of people who can. There's lots of people who have a depth of knowledge way beyond mine. Plenty of them. But like, you're criticizing the president of the United States doesn't have that. And this whole media apparatus with all of their prestige and money and resources, they're sitting there just pretending that he does when we all know it's bullshit. All right, listen, I got to wrap on that because I do got to get moving. But thank you to all you guys for listening. I apologize for the switch up in the schedule. That was my fault. Don't blame poor Natalie. She's a good girl. But I will get the members only episode out to you guys in the next day. So look forward to that.
If you never checked it out, go check out the Run Your Mouth podcast, Robbie the Fire, all one word, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. And even if you don't want to check out the whole episode, I'm doing these wild news spoof intros. So go check them out. Give it a watch.
Hell yeah. All right. Catch you guys next time. Peace.